Sup again. This is again another third edition of saying thanks for pressing that button and uh, tuning in. I guess I just want to go ahead and continue that last example about the GPS coordinate bullshit. That was another way of saying that. I guess the grander point that needs to be made is this idea that um, all motion everywhere in the universe is unified at its origin. Um, Nothing in the universe starts moving unless something that's previously moving beforehand bumps into it and presses it, it ha- forces it to move as well. Um, there's this deterministic notion that there's this idea of universal causality that A causes B causes C. Things like billiard balls on a pool table, they knock into each other, and then the thing they knock into, then it continues to move. Um, Things don't arise independently in different places in the universe and then start moving by themselves. There's one source, um, and in that light, you're in that same way of seeing things. All this momentum of the weight that's in motion right now. The planets are in orbit around the sun. The Earth is in orbit, and that mass of its existence it's being propelled forward, and that same that same pressure that's being applied to that weight is also what is being applied to you as a physical object on its surface. Every time you get up and move, in any way, shape, or form, even the internal operations of your mind, all that motion has as its source the original um, first movement, so to speak, of all things in the universe, where they all something touch something else to make it move forward. You can trace all events back to the previous causes, and those causes back on the previous causes, and those causes back on the previous causes. What touched what and make what go forward. Um, so there were, before you were born, there were two things that came together, bumped. That's where the origin of your movement started. Um, so that's one grand feature of Einsteinian, um, the Einstein paradigm, as opposed to Newtonian physics. Is that all motion is tied intrinsically, and fundamentally, it's tied together in one original movement. Um, so that was the only point I was trying to make in that last example. It didn't really come out right because I wasn't thinking it through, and then I forgot what I was talking about because they weren't linked together close enough in my head to get it out. But I had to um, just take a little break there because I don't want to, the file size to get too large. But um, getting back to the adversarial law, I think the important thing to note, though, and I think that I left out last time, was that the fundamental error with it, why it's not an efficient process of reading out the truth in general, is because it creates a condition where it's in both sides' interest. Both the prosecution and the defense have a intrinsically embedded interest to withhold the truth in ways they find legally permissible, and that's the feature of it that some people find attractive at first because they see themselves as a defendant, of course. Um, it's really only good for criminals, but in most cases, but in a very broad, most general sense, it creates an interest in both sides to withhold the truth in ways they find illegally permissible. Both, through attorney-client privileges, seems the most obvious right there, but also from the prosecution side, if there's any instance where they can, they find something, they don't have to give it up, to the other side if they don't, feel compelled by legal legal authority to do so. Um, so there's an aspect there that's fundamentally um, counterintuitive to discovering the truth in general. So you can't say that um, the the greatest standard of virtue is the truth when it's not. The greatest standard of virtue, and it's stated, explicitly from the get go. You read any kind of legal documentation or philosophical authority on the subject in any language. It's the greatest standard of virtue is individual rights. In the United States, it's individual rights is governed directly by the Constitution, um, and so we got to throw that shit out. Um, the greatest standard of virtue anywhere, everywhere, for all time is the truth, especially in a legal system. I would, again, assume just as a normal, person. Um, so, in other words, if you're not guilty, then yes, I would rather get sized up by a team of scientists and be completely transparent, as a as a sign of my patriotic duty. You know, check me off. Get me off the list so you can move on to the next guy and find out who really did it. And the only people actually having a problem with that are those who might be guilty. Um, so there's that need to get out. Another part of this overview, just to go ahead and give you a little expose on myself, a CV, if you will. It's a Latin phrase that the curriculum vitae or some other pronunciation. It's no different than a resume, but it's more of a more official or a more formal form of one that generally professors use as they're going from college to college or university. It's usually in the PhD circuit of affairs that is incorporated as a sort of an introduction, professional introduction. But I guess mine would consist of I did right out of high school I attended a military school, the Citadel. The reason I went there, going back into high school, middle school, I grew up. I was eighth grade. I took a high school. I took not a high school course, but that was the year I learned some things about it, the Civil War and the history course that sort of changed my view about some things and led me to believe that society might be a little fucked up in the way that you know, popular culture puts things that aren't true as true. Um, but I won't go there. I won't too much in that. We're gonna believe about it anyway. I have no problem, developing, my ongoing thought about it if you have a problem with it. Um, but that's what led me to go to the Citadel. It was the Confederate Military Academy during the Civil War. Um, I'd watched that movie, The Lords of Discipline, and as a result, I had to go there. So that was all there was to it. Otherwise, I would have been, signed up, at the Air Force Academy like my uncle, or West Point, or one of the federal academies like normal rich people are supposed to go to. But I had to go to the Citadel, and that it's a good school. It's a good in terms of military drill and things like that go. It's number one in the country, but it's the roughest stuff as military school in the world. Um, that's a school where people die, in accident all the time. Because people get they accidentally fall up a flight of stairs while they're tied up and shit. That kind of place. I don't know why anyone would to go there, but I had a lot of good experiences there. I remember as an orientation period, you go to these different classes, as a part of your onboarding during sort of not Hell Week, but Hell Month, and then there's a Hell Week on top of that. But part of that onboarding process is you get an introduction to your your team members who are in charge, and one of those members is the guy you go to in case you're getting abused. Some bad time. You need to you need to call the police or some shit. Someone's coming here and tickling you in the night. You're not supposed to do that kind of shit. They're beating you up on the side for no reason. Well, anyway, that guy that we had this huge class and all this stuff. He's like, remember, you got anything happens, you come to me, and I'll make it right, because we had liaisons there from the federal academies like West Point, and he was the cadet, member that would go in between us and the actual government, federal government, and so he was our point person, and anyway, that night after, we'd had that class earlier in the day about all this stuff that was considered hazing, and that night he he come by each dorm room, knocks on the door, and of course we brace and stand at attention, we're snap up and all that shit, 2 men per barracks, and he walks in there, doesn't say a word, just punches you as hard as he fucking can, right in your gut, puts you on the floor, you can't breathe for about 10 minutes. As he's walking out the door, he's like, Ben Hayes, bye, contact me, bye. And just walks, that's the kind of place the Citadel is. I mean, for real. And so that was it was a great experience. I was glad to know at least still around. I was hoping something like that was still going on, but that's that. Anyway, after that, my scholastic career ended up at the University of North Florida, being continued there, where I ran into some old high school friends from Nice High School. We were in the Navy ROTC together, particularly a guy, a Marine Corps guy at that time, Justin Damiano. He was the current student body president at UNF, an old time friend that really got me into the jive of the student government there, and from the time that I met him to the following year and a half later, when I actually myself ran for student body president. In that time, I was instrumental in creating the two-party system there at UNF now, that exist. The Red Blue Party. I was the guy who made that happen. That was my idea. I put all the effort into establishing that system there, and it's there today. From what from what I remember, it was um, very formative period in the university itself, and I'm assuming that the two party system is still there. The Red Blue Party are still active today. I'm not sure, but I'm the guy who made that happen and am credited with that result. Um, um, what else? First time it was published, it was I was in a 5,000 level course with Dr. Susan Fisher. She was a philosophy science teacher. She was formative in much of my formal logic, the way that I put things together internally and between theories, and not just the actual content of a theory itself, but how we link them together that form meta. I don't want to call meta theories, but paradigms. How we go from one to the other. I wrote a piece for her that ended up, you know, it was the reason why there was no curve in the class. She really gave me a lot of praise and props in that. Um, the very first paper, the one that was published, um, before we got it back, she went on and on about why there wasn't going to be a curve. But there was only one person who got an A. The rest of you guys are getting D's and F's. Sorry, I can't do anything about it. There's no curve anyway. Um, she was just saying that in order to get an A in anything, she needs to be enlightened in some way about something that she didn't know before. And and so she gave me a lot of. We worked together a little bit. She ended up later that week. But as a kid, I worked at the Fresh Market in Ponte Vedra, and she ended up coming to my work and shopping and scared me to death. This lady, a very very attractive woman, um, and New York City University again, several PhDs from mathematics to science to philosophy, I think formal logic. She had a PhD in some. I know it was roughly 3 or 4 PhDs. I know that much, um, but I ended up taking her groceries out to her car for her. We pretended like we didn't know each other. It was awkward as all hell. And then, I was just trying not to drool at her. And it turns out later I did a little digging around, and she lived all the way on the other side of town. She came out there just to see me. And so anyway, there were several other papers, and I don't, I'm not going to go too much into it, but she was very formative in helping me gain a lot of confidence in my working knowledge of these scientific theories. Just knowing that, yeah, I'm absolutely right. I know this stuff's solid through and through. Um, she helped me to really understand that, um, that um, it is as I think it is, or thought that it is. Was in the paper, all that stuff I wrote down for her in the class. Um, that was a lot of effort that I put forward, and uh, it was a writing on Thomas Kuhn and the nature of scientific revolutions in general. How it's at some point in time it becomes a political decision that we have to make that jump at first, and then later down the road in hindsight we put things together and see it as coming together in a way that's not um, opinion anymore. When it comes to things that are metaphysical, you have to first make a jump there, and then collect facts after that. But that's Thomas Kuhn, and you have any interest in that, you can look it up and read an official text. Um, Other than that, I've been published by. I work with a guy I met through the university system, Dr. Antonio T. De Nicholas. He was a former advisor to the Pope. He was a traveling professor from Spain. He had advised the Pope on ways to advance church interests. The Pope had sent a special request, and he was also he was the director of the biocultural research group in St. Augustine, and he is responsible for the biocultural paradigm today. Um, it's a grand narrative for how we knit together um, what mm, what's the great debate in social sciences today? Individuality and culture, and there's neuro pathways and this, that, and the other. It's a um, new way of understanding this dynamic where um, whatever that is in the social sciences today, that's a big deal. He solves that problem. Um, um, this this individual versus the environment and the relationship between the two, how they interact, and um, but he wrote a book. Well, he didn't write it, but he had translated it. It was the first translation from English to from Spanish. San Juan de la Cruz. It was written by Saint John of the Cross. Um, it was this long story about the Dark Knight and how this guy was. He would thrust himself into it and join the other half of the universe, and it was a very philosophical writing about what was going on physically with him. And so I just didn't know what was up. So I just wrote a piece on it, and the guy afterwards came and had me sign all his waivers to have it published. I still get paid for it today, and I wrote a couple other pieces that he's included in some of his textbooks, and but more significantly into a lot of his research as well. And that's really means a lot to me that he, was able to use that. But anyway, the subject. Well, getting back to San Juan de la Cruz, the piece that I wrote about it, I just it had a bunch of turned out later to be archetypes of the mind that exists, um, and you just have to experience it what it is. And he would, the whole book was about um, just putting it in there and getting it done with a girl. That's what the book was about. I don't know any way to say it. More euphemistically than that. That's what I had in the back of my mind. I'm like, is this guy? These are some of the same images I got that I really pondered after it was over. This one time that was really good. I'm like, oh my God, this is right. Afterwards, he's like, yes, 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 all these check marks, plus, plus, plus. I'm like, holy fuck, I thought it was just going to be bogus and I have to drop the corpse or some shit. I just put my 2 cents in and get out of there. But, so that was a really a great experience that really made me appreciate the university circuit itself and why it's um, it's such a different atmosphere to be in, and understand that in some places things are a lot different. People are a lot different in the way they interact with each other on a higher level, and they don't really talk about anything other than um, important things, not each other. So I'll leave it with that. I'm going to sign off now, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of this. Bye.